All righty. Welcome. I am Heather Pierce Campbell, the legal website warrior. I serve information entrepreneurs throughout the US and around the world. Welcome to another episode of Guts, Grit, and Great Business. I am super excited for our guest today. There's a whole backstory to how I connected with Keren, but welcome to Keren Eldad.
Hi, Heather. It's such an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, it's so fun. Well, we have a favorite human in common, Tracy Holland, right?
The
And if
one
you're
and
listening,
only.
she's fabulous. And we recorded a conversation sometime last year, and she's just so real. She's
Yeah.
amazing. You definitely need to go listen to that conversation. But Tracy had worked with Keren, and actually in that conversation, I think she mentioned you.
Okay.
And then Tracy, I think, shared out. And then I got a message from Keren, and I had like once we had the conversation, once I had the conversation with Tracy, I remember thinking I should go reach out to Keren. Tracy's raving about Keren. And then there you were in my inbox. And then I messaged you, let's get you on the podcast. So here you
That's so
are.
funny.
I know it's
I loved it. I
super.
just wanted to tell you I loved that episode and you did such an amazing job. Obviously, she always brings the realness, but it's such an amazing job, such an
Mhm.
amazing show. And I wanted to say that was awesome.
Oh, thank you. Well, it was super fun. I love my guests. I have a great time on my podcast, which is the only way I ever wanted to do it. I launched it at the start of COVID and I just told myself, and I had all my systems set up, everything before I ever launched. I'd recorded like, I don't know, 30 episodes. Like it was just,
Yeah.
I told myself I cannot do this in a way that stresses me out, needs to be enjoyable. It always has been from the start. And we're past the 3-year mark now. We've climbed to the top 3% of podcasts in the world. That was the last time I checked, which has been a little while. So, anyways, it's been fabulous. And I absolutely adore my guests. I know that people are going to get so much value from this conversation. If you are joining in today and you do not know Keren Eldad, Keren is an acclaimed motivational speaker, leadership psychology expert, and founder of With Enthusiasm Coaching. Before, oh my gosh, and even that name, we'll have to have a separate little chat about enthusiasm. But before becoming an internationally recognized coach, Keren had an illustrious business career and a husband, neither of which she cared for. Oh my goodness. After finding the courage to get a divorce and quit her life inside out, establishing her business. Oh, excuse me. Let me pause. My editor will fix this. After finding the courage to get a divorce and quit the high paying job, she turned inward and did the work, turning her life inside out, establishing her business, finding real love, and now vowing to help anyone else who wants freedom, autonomy, and professional expression do the same. There are some amazing things in there that I think so many people can relate to, and I can't wait to hear more about your story. My joke, I went through a divorce, and at the time, of course, it was devastating, right? I just felt like,
Yeah.
oh, such a failure. I can't even make like relationship number one work in my life, right? And then I remember hearing my favorite DJ on the radio who had a couple kids say, and one of them was going through a divorce. And he just said, everybody needs to get one of these under their belt. It was the first time I had laughed about it. And then I couldn't stop. I was like, oh my gosh, like it's not just me.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's welcome. It's an honor to have you. And I can tell there's a lot about your journey that is
Yeah.
really important to share.
I mean, your show is called Guts, Grit, and Great Business, right? And that's where great businesses come from, guts and grit, and a real transformation. So I really love starting with this particular bio and not the here's what Keren has done and here's who Keren works with, blah blah
Yeah.
nonsense. The second thing I want to say is I really want to just play off of what you said in the beginning, which is I decided to make this fun. I don't
Mm,
think there's any point not making this fun. And the moment in my life that started the transformation was when I looked around and I had everything, quote unquote, and none of it was fun.
yeah.
What's the point of being in the top 3% of podcasts if you don't actually like it? I don't see the point.
Well, there is no point. That's the reality.
Yeah.
And I think it's, this whole connection to work and how we feel about it just
Yeah.
cannot be stated enough how important it is that if we don't already, and I've seen it written different ways, and some things I agree with, some things I disagree with, but if you don't already love your work, like either go through the process of finding something to love and be enthusiastic about when you show up
Mhm.
until you create the next opportunity,
Yes.
right? Because, and the other thing is like the
Or
only
burn
way,
it to the ground and just go for
or burn
the
it to the
real thing that
ground.
lights
That's
you up.
true. That's true.
Absolutely.
If you're
Yeah.
not ready to make that step, like let's pretend you've got some real practical
Yeah.
constraints, right? You may need to build the bridge rather than just leap.
Of course.
So there are different pathways for getting there, but this whole thing about having enthusiasm and love for our work. First of all, it's how you move mountains. You don't move
Mhm.
mountains without enthusiasm,
Yeah.
without like a tremendous commitment that is bigger than just the outward accolades or the thing, that you're striving for. And you don't enroll people along the way to your work, to your process, to whatever it is that you're doing or delivering to the world without being enthusiastic about it. Full
That's the truth.
stop.
It's the truth. And it has to be authentic. That word enthusiasm is sort of like the word happiness. A lot of people have decided it's either abstract or untenable, and neither is
Mhm.
correct. Both of these are academic terms, just FYI, and measurable. And all enthusiasm means, it doesn't mean the disposition of a golden retriever, which, let's be
Mm-mm.
honest, is adorable. It just means fully charged. If you are not
Mhm.
fully charged, you are depleted. And if you are depleted or just lackluster, this is simply not going to, as you said, climb that mountain, and certainly not going to get anybody to come with you. And that's
Yeah.
really what the brand is about. It's about getting people just excited about being here, being in their life, being in their body, being in this world.
Mm. Was that so your business, and the name, the fact that you actually built enthusiasm into that, what came before that for you? I'd love to hear,
Yeah.
because it sounds like kind of a from the ashes type of story. And I think it's really important that people hear those stories because so often if we're at a point of like, oh my gosh, I either have to burn this down or, find some way to do it differently, we can
Yeah.
really beat ourselves up about reaching a point like that.
No, absolutely. And I think there are two faces to the preconditions that brought about this rise of
Mhm.
Phoenix story that I do have. And it is a rise from the ashes.
Mhm.
But I want to talk about to a specific type of person, and so that they can recognize it within themselves if they see
Mhm.
themselves in me. I have always looked enthusiastic. I'm like Pink. Pink says even before she went to therapy and she found herself, she was brassy and
Mm,
supercharged and joyful looking and social. And unfortunately, that's a mask. It's a mask we're very
mm,
conditioned to wear, and that's something that we can preternaturally do. It comes easy to us. So no, most people cannot tell that anything is wrong, and even worse, we cannot tell for very long periods of time that anything is wrong. So I look fine. My work is fine. I'm working at a C-suite position in a C-suite organization. I am in my early 30s, so still young, still bubbling, enough money, was married to a tall guy, which, as you know, Heather, is the ideal. Everything looks great on Instagram. The house is really big. I got it
mm,
all, right? Until I started to ask myself, why do I feel like every morning is so hard to get out of bed? I knew it wasn't a clinical condition. Because I functioned at a very high level, and I could have great moments of joy in interactions with people. But I started to examine my life and understand that pretty much every one of my selections was not really my own choice. It was a
mm,
conditioned choice. It was something I was trained into. I was taught this was what a good life is. This is what appropriate looks like. This is what looks right on Instagram and to the world. And also, I unfortunately bought into a lot of limiting beliefs about my abilities. You can't start your own business. Women can't manage money. Who are you to get out there and to do something by yourself? Divorce is a big no no and would be a huge stain on the rest of your life. Maybe some of these are resonating with you. So I'm thinking, all right, let's just keep the systems going and look as happy as possible. Luckily, because of this inner juice, I guess, I couldn't tolerate that for a very long time. And
mm,
it all came crashing down. And it was by my own hand. I was the one who said, I'm getting divorced. I'm out of this abusive, horrifying marriage, which, by the way, did look very good on Instagram, but felt
mm,
awful to be in. I uh, did live in a very big house, but it was in Zurich, Switzerland. And I don't know if you're familiar with Zurich, Switzerland, but for a New Yorker, that is like death, only slower.
mm.
And The C-suite job was great and it was a very nice job, but it was nothing compared to what I knew I could do with my own life.
Mm.
So one after the other, I quit the job, I got out of the house, I have zero money, I go sleep on friends' couches, and I start my life from zero.
Mm.
And that was the beginning of everything.
Talk to me about the times right before each of those decisions, because I feel like there is a time that people hit that need to make decisions like this where they either make it or if
Yeah.
they don't, it becomes even harder to make it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So there are two patterns that I identified in myself and that I now see in my clients that
Mhm.
will start to indicate this for you. The first is increasing aimlessness. Just, it's almost like it doesn't
Mm.
feel like sadness. It just feels like a lot of, what am I doing here? Is this all there is? And
Like an
just moments
empty.
where empty, exactly, like you
Mhm.
hit accolades and you don't understand or not processing them as joyful. So that's one hallmark. The other is traumatic events start to happen. And
Mm.
they do happen. They 100% start to happen when you're in the wrong life. You will start
Yep.
to literally attract those
Something's
conditions.
trying to kick you out of that life the way that
Literally.
it is. Yeah.
And in my case, there were just a couple of things. First, he was treating me very, very badly. And secondly, I got robbed. I realized that he hadn't paid the insurance, which made the robbery even worse. A whole bunch of other moments just collapsed into me, almost like a car crash. And
Mm.
those were big wake up and smell the coffee moments. You are in a distressful situation. And they became more and more intense until the point where I just thought, I don't have anything to lose anymore.
Mm. So did you feel like it was an active choice or that you got pushed?
A little bit of both.
A little both.
I,
Yeah.
I'm kind of glad that I
Yeah.
got pushed because I think I was a fraidy cat before. Today I would have
Mhm.
jumped ball by myself. But back then I really was absolutely terrified of all, what these choices would mean,
Mm.
you know?
Well, it's so interesting because like so many other guests, telling their stories where it's involved any amount of hardship or even like excruciating hardship, where once you are in the right lane and in the right life, like you have so much gratitude for those experiences. Like my first
Absolutely.
husband, I have so much gratitude
Yeah.
that he cheated on me because that's what was required for me to exit that marriage, right? And that was not the right place for me to be. Never
No,
was,
that's exactly right.
right? But
I
I
I
think
got to bump into my ex-husband in Geneva a few years ago and he literally said, "I'm sorry." And
Mm,
I remember
mhm.
looking at him and saying, "Are you kidding me? I would have written an even bigger check to get out of that." He gave me a big, big master's degree in life. And I really meant
Mhm.
it. I,
Mhm.
of course, if I could have spared myself suffering and others suffering, I certainly would have. But we learn the way we learn. And ultimately, it sets us exactly, exactly on the path we're supposed to be on.
Oh, it's true. And every woman that I know that is, for lack of a better analogy, that's like a diamond, right? Like so beautiful and so tough and
Yeah,
like they've walked through the fire. They've
of
been
course.
forced through these positions where, they've had to make hard choices and they did, and they massively accelerated their growth, what they're
Yeah.
capable of, what their opportunities are, all of it.
And Heather, that actually brings me to how far I've come. Today, I can
Mm.
anticipate how useful this is going to be. If I start feeling angry or bitter, uncomfortable, I
Yep.
know favor is coming. I'm glad because I understand that what is happening is the systems are intolerable. It's time to move. And in
Mhm.
that sense, I can say with great confidence, today I would leap. Back then, I needed a push.
Yes. Oh, it's so powerful. I was talking with somebody whose episode will come out relatively soon, and he lives in the spiritual space, and he's very much also about guiding, but really exclusively in a spiritual way, like upper level CEOs. And he just said, you learn to welcome that discomfort.
Yes.
It is the sign you are in an up level, right? Like something is about to change. And so it's so contrary to human nature because what do we crave? We crave safety, we crave comfort, we
Yeah.
crave, in a lot of ways, sameness, at least from and I think for women too, in particular,
Of course.
those needs for safety. This was part of the conversation with Tracy, right? The need for safety and security is like,
It's a human emotional need. Carl Jung said this even
mhm.
before Tracy did, about 100 years ago.
Oh,
Essentially,
totally.
we're all wired the same way. However, I want to distinguish between what we crave in order to feel emotional safety versus what we need for ultimate ascension or
Yes.
self-actualization, the highest end of the emotional needs pyramid. And that is, you actually need growth, you need change, and you need problems. And whether we like them or not, they are calling forth the next level. And if you can start to like literally meet those moments, like your spiritual guide has said, with let's get a shot because this is a really exciting moment. Favor is coming. L'chaim, you're in a different zone.
Absolutely. So share with us. So you make this series of decisions that are hard decisions, right? You
Yeah.
you take this leap. Talk to us about some of the early like building days. Where did you go? What did you encounter along the way that have been some of your best lessons? And then we
Yeah.
can talk about where you're at now.
Well, I didn't get off and set off into the journey of starting my own business, let alone becoming a teacher and a coach. But it
Mm,
came to me through the inner journey, which is why I always say go on the inner journey with no agenda and just watch what happens. Like let yourself unfold and see what comes through you. And luckily, because I had nothing to lose and I was broke as a joke, I had all the opportunity in the world to just explore
mm,
and go as deep as possible for as long as possible. And in this, because of the frustration and especially because of the lack of autonomy that I felt like my
mm,
hands were bound to a corporation. They were bound to a marriage that I hated. They were
mm,
bound to somebody else who was managing my money. That anger was a desire for autonomy and for freedom and to run my own life. This is what ultimately leads me to start my own business. I began to understand very quickly that there is no such thing as the American dream or a linear life anymore.
mm,
Probably not, hasn't been since the 60s, which
mhm,
means that their life stage correlated with your age doesn't exist anymore, that you can no longer expect good education, good career, retire at 65, enjoy the rest of your life anymore, that the only way for me to actually enjoy a life on my own terms was to create it. And this
mm,
is where everything comes into place with the business that I launched. Because I didn't have any money, I did it the safe way. You said build a bridge sometimes
mhm.
instead of just take a leap. I did.
Yep.
I took all the low hanging fruit of what I knew how to do and I knew I was going to sell and put all those in motion so I could pay the rent and so that I could make some
Mhm.
money, could have enough money to build my business too, because building businesses costs money.
Yes, it
And
does.
then, and so does coaching. And all of those had to be paid for, not to mention, cat food and my Soul House membership. And
Right.
in addition to all of that, I launched the coaching business. I launched the coaching business in 2017, almost exactly 7 years ago. And I think I was in a headspace that was so clear about what I wanted to do
Mhm.
that I, within 24 hours, sold out my first program. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Well, and what an affirmation from the universe about that shift onto the right track,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
You see those moments. I mean, when I decided to create my second business, which is the Legal Website Warrior, I didn't have a website. I literally just messaged people, and these are people that were at the top of their industries that I knew I could help, even though I'm like, we'll see if they work with
Yeah.
me. Like, who knows? But I got great business coaching. And my coach at the time, who also has been on the podcast, Jacob Roy, who's phenomenal, said, go to the top. Who can you help? Go to the top and start
Yes.
offering to help them. And
Yeah.
so I had enrolled like dream clients without a website, without
Mm.
like, and I just remember it like clicking into place, like these people and a whole slew of them. I'm not even talking just like one dream client, like five, in a matter of
Yeah.
like a couple weeks that were like, yes, we had just put on the schedule to meet and talk about hiring counsel this week. Yes, we were
Wow.
just and every time, every person that I reached out to had this
Yeah.
story of like, yes, it was actually on our agenda. We lined up calls with three other attorneys. We'll have to, have those meetings, but we'll get back to you. And what did they
Yeah.
did? They got back to me and they hired me. So it's
Yes, it is an energetic alignment. You're, of
yes.
course, making me think of the phrase leap and the net will appear. And for those who
Mhm.
don't see it clicking quite as fast, I don't think that should disappoint you or dismay you or anything like that. but you may still be energetically not aligned with what you want. In other words, not fully ready to
Mm.
accept that you're ready, that you really are
Yes.
ready. I think
Yes.
that's what's usually happening with the cause for delays.
Yeah. No, that's so true. And it's such a good reflection point, I think, for a lot of us when we're having those moments of like, gosh, this is a little crunchier than it should be, or something's not quite clicking,
Yeah.
to really like go back again and do that inner exploration. Before, and I know that this is going to go wonderful ways, but there's a question because you raised it, like the amount of like anger or frustration or resentment that you were feeling. I think this is a really important topic for women.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
reading several books right now that probably I should have read years ago. I feel like so many of us as women learn to really become acquainted with anger in our adult lives, right? As children, it's not okay. It's
Mm-mm.
generally societally not okay to express it. It's especially not okay if you are
Of course.
female, right? And
Hard no.
so hard no. And it's I feel like a really like necessary part of the journey, but and I'll mention the 3 books just because I love books and whenever I say it like, "Oh yeah, I'm reading books," I realize people listening may be like, "What is the book? Let's hear the
Yes.
title." So 3 of them. One, All About Love by Bell Hooks, been around a while, 20 years,
Yeah.
right? But it's looking at love through the construct of like what our patriarchal
Yes.
system has done to it, how it's viewed, how we show up to it, even our definition of it. The other book is Rage Becomes Her.
Oh, I
Really,
love that title.
really important book by Soraya Shamali, all about why women experience and it's such an important conversation, and I just feel the need to point this out. And then one by Gemma Hartley, Fed Up, right? Emotional
Yeah.
labor, women, and the way forward. So, but they all are intersecting at this
Yeah.
point of women, boundaries, the patriarchy, and what our anger is telling us
Yes.
about what needs to change.
Bell Hooks had a very lovely approach to it
Mhm.
because she did not turn this into resistance against men.
Mm-mm.
It was
What?
about a union with rather than a resistance against. And this is a very important thing to understand about rage or about anger. It is a gateway emotion. It is a very
Mhm.
useful emotion and it is a gateway emotion. And once we come to terms with it and understand what it means, which is what I was saying before, and that's also why, by the way, you have to check your energetic availability for the next level, not just at the inception of your business, but again and again and again as your business grows and evolves, which I hope we'll talk about a little bit more. And anger will always be
Mhm.
your indication. And to repress anger and to not
Yes.
allow anger. See, I don't know if people can detect the sexy accent, but I am Israeli. And we have a terrible reputation for being angry all the time, almost laughably so. So I learned very quickly, since I lived outside the country almost all my
Mhm.
life, that this is unacceptable behavior and you must make it as British as possible. My demeanor, my
Mhm.
posture has to always be pleasing and lovely and not hysterical and not argumentative. So I learned to
Mhm.
tone it down, instead of thinking, or maybe the fact that you're frustrated and angry is indicating to you that something doesn't work and should be changed so that you can evolve into hope,
Mhm.
into joy, into acceptance, into enthusiasm. And if you
Mhm.
start to understand anger as that, it's a gateway emotion. That's all.
Mhm.
You will start to rage, find rage becomes you. Gosh, I love that. That reminds me of the great movie from the 80s, Death Becomes Her, starring the one and only Meryl Streep.
Love Meryl. Yeah, well, I love that you point out like anger is the signpost, it is the way, because
Yeah.
I think so often, even now, like I look at my relationship to anger, it's uncomfortable to like be there, stay
Yeah.
there, really dissect it. And yet, the beautiful theme that is coming out of these books is like, pay attention to it. It's not bad.
Yeah.
You just, it is that calling to expand, to look beyond, to, figure out what it is that needs to change. And anyways, I love that. And
And I love that it ties back to what you asked before, which is like, did I find the indications of the fact that I was being pushed? Forget the traumatic events for a second. The problem with anger is it appears for very different people with different behavioral styles in different ways. There
yeah,
are people who show it up as rage. There are
yeah.
people who are fed up, but there are also people who have quiet frustration. There are people like me who experience bitterness.
Yes, or
My
resentment. It shows
yes,
up as resentment.
exactly. My version of
Mhm.
anger is not how it's how am I being overlooked this way?
Mhm.
The indignation. These are all anger. They're all the
Mhm.
same thing. And that's a very, very exciting thing to understand.
Oh, totally. Our familial culture
Yeah.
influences it, our personal biology influences it. Like women who tend to be more alpha women are more capable of expressing anger in traditionally angry ways that would normally be assigned to a male
Yeah.
expression, right? But it's so important because, first of all, it's so present for
Yeah.
most women in a variety of ways, and it's not something to be avoided. It is the
No.
sign. It is the signpost. It is the path. So, anyways, I
And it's
love that.
also a critical, I just want to say one more thing. Sorry.
Mhm.
It's a critical skill because as part of business, you want a great business. Conflict is part of the
Mhm.
game, whether you like it or not. And people like me who are super conflict averse, I like to joke that I have the spine of a gummy worm. I'm a sweetheart, Heather. We have to learn that conflict is part of the game, and your job is to
Mhm.
have strong boundaries and to be okay with conflict. And anger is part of it.
That's it. That's it. The core teaching, even though I deliver legal support and legal services, the core teaching for most of my services is boundaries.
Yeah,
That's it is about protecting the thing that you're building so that it can operate in the world at its best ability,
that's
right?
right.
And yeah, structure and boundaries can make people really uncomfortable, but also at new levels of business, you get to create new boundaries, right?
That's right.
You are constantly going to have people cross boundaries all the way up,
All the time.
all the way. It's not something that stops. You get better at it and you get better at managing it. That's
Mhm.
a skill set that's really important, especially for women to
Yep.
develop. But it's just about knowing and expressing those boundaries clearly, and your business will thrive so much more. Anyways, I
Amen.
love that. I love that you raised it. I think it's a really important piece of the conversation for women, including about how we get back to joy, back to
Yeah.
enthusiasm when we see those posts of anger and resentment and like something's going wrong. Um, so share with us, like, and I know we're just picking out pieces of your journey, right? But share with us at what point you made this leap. I obviously you said like right away you enrolled all these clients, like you filled up your enrollment, and from there the rest is history. So that's been the last 7 years.
Yeah.
Talk to us about some of your learnings from those 7 years, and then we can shift into who you serve, what they're doing in the world, right?
I mean, the first thing I learned was to say yes to the calling, right? And
Mhm.
to feel the feelings, but then to understand what the message is in the feelings. And the analogy I like to give people, Heather, is Lieutenant Dan in the storm. Do you remember Lieutenant Dan in the storm? And it was shaking and the boat was rocking and they might not make it through the night. And he's yelling at God, "Is that the best you've got?" And then in the morning, the ship comes in, right? Like they get all their shrimp. And Forrest Gump says, "I believe that in that battle, Lieutenant Dan made his peace with God. You will resolve the issues, you will make peace with them, you will accept where you are, and then there is only way, and it is up. You don't even have to lift a finger. You will literally just start to move up. And in order to move up, I think my biggest lesson initially was just do it.
Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
I think most women should run a business. I think most women should break the barriers. I think the fact that only 2% of us make it to seven-figure business is appalling, and we
Yeah.
must transcend this stat. I have, everybody else can. I'm not special. And the only thing that changed this for me was the decision to get over my imposter syndrome, get over the many conditioning ideas I got throughout my life that I can't, and here's why I can't, and decided to just go for it. Today, it seems so obvious because I'm successful and it's worked out, right?
Yeah.
But back then, it was like, I think I can. And I did.
Mhm.
And that was the huge, huge thing is just go for it. Just keep going. And if you're willing to do that, you will do it again and again in your business. And that's how your business will grow.
Mm. Well, and I can't remember the exact phrase. There is a brilliant phrase that is like, you know, just beginning is half the battle. And
That's right.
that's the piece that speaks to like making the decision to go do it and then taking the action that says, I'm serious about this and I'm
Yeah.
following up.
Well, and you just have to have a big why. You don't have to have a big explanation of why you. And that's the
Yeah,
big problem. Most people are always thinking about it. Well, let's justify my existence here, especially women, right? But
especially
don't
women.
justify your existence. Just make a decision that you got to do this because you can't deal
Mhm.
with another second of living under the thumb of oppression. That's it. That's all
Mhm.
you need.
So, and I heard you mention the name, like I responded to the calling, right? The phrase. How do people know? Because I think some folks, and I think it depends on energetically how we're wired. Like things for me are either a clear yes or a clear no, right?
Yeah,
But some folks, they have to really think about it. It takes more time to really process and digest. How do you recognize when something is a calling?
that was a wonderful question. I hope everybody's listening very, very closely. Put your ear right on the headphone right now. There are two ways to receive a call. One is from outside the house and one is from inside the house. Do you remember that movie? I Know What You Did Last Summer. The call is coming from inside the house. In this instance, the call coming from inside the house is the good call, and anything coming from outside the house is a bad call. A call that's
Mm,
coming from outside the house is a call that is motivated from external factors. I need, I must, I should. It usually feels not comfortable. It feels like it's full of resistance. It feels like something I really need to think about, and it feels like the consequences will last forever. They're very high stakes, like getting a tattoo or
mm.
something.
Yeah, and
Versus
it's the push the boulder up the hill.
exactly.
Yeah.
The whenever the consequences are really, really heavy and the outcome is very, very heavy, you're listening to a call from outside the house. A call from inside the house feels like a basket of kittens. It is exciting. It's interesting. You sort of want to know where it goes next. You're not particularly obsessed with the details. You are just following a rabbit down a hole. That's a
Mhm.
completely different call. And it's really easy to tell the difference because everybody knows the difference between it feels tight in my chest when I think about this, and it feels
Mhm.
exciting and open and delicious.
Mhm. I love the way that you've just described it. It reminds me of one of my clients, one of the teachings in her book. This is from Tara Moore,
Mm,
who talks about the two different kinds of fears, right? And I think a lot of times things can feel like fear to us that are really that calling. Like she has, I think the way she described it is pashad, which is one type of fear, and then yara, which is the other type of fear. And it's actually what you've just laid out in a slightly different way. She says, Pashad is the fear of imagined or projected things. This is the thing
mm,
about the heavy weight,
mm-hmm.
the huge consequences, the worst case scenarios that
Yeah,
we think of, right? That are like, oh, we have to do this, but it feels heavy. Versus Yara, which comes to us, she says, when we inhabit a larger space than we are used to, with awe, serenity,
exactly.
reverence, vitality,
Yeah,
and passion. It's like the
yeah.
juiciest,
Yeah.
best part.
Yeah, it's funny. As soon as you said yir'ah, I thought to myself, that's Hebrew, and yir'ah means
Mhm,
awe. It means
mhm.
awe. Awe is a different kind of. Of course, it's like a little. Oh my god, this is really big, but it's
Yeah.
the very different kind of. It's like I'm about to get on the roller coaster at Disney World. Not, am I ever going to come out of this tunnel alive? These are
Yes.
completely different
Yes.
kinds of fear, right? And
Mhm,
you do know the difference. That's the truth. You do know the
mhm,
difference, and you can learn how to listen for it.
mhm. No, and I love it. And I just think it's a really important conversation for women to also get comfortable around that little bit push and pull of fear and being able to recognize, is this the
Mm,
good kind motivating me in the right direction, right?
yeah.
With that pull energy, not the push energy. And, anyways, but I really like the basket of kittens. I want everything to be the basket of kittens.
Agreed. Agreed.
Um, so, here you are doing work that you love, right? You're in the right lane. You have some things immediately go right for you
That's
that
right.
confirms that,
Yes.
right? And we've talked a little bit about how that's a process. It's not a place that you land and you just stay in.
No.
It's a process. What have you learned in working with your clients over the years? What are some of your like most valuable learnings or teachings that for people listening, I mean women for sure, right? But this is going to be an audience of men and women.
Yes.
What do you think are some of the most valuable things that either that we need to know that we continue to get stuck around, even as high
Mhm.
performers, even as people that hold themselves to high standards, right? Or that, our mindset shifts that we can make to
Mhm.
make things a lot easier.
Mhm. So the same lessons I learned are the lessons my clients have learned. They're both men and women,
Mm,
but we all have one thing in common. We are all overachievers. And forget highest echelons of society or whatever kind of C-suite executive I serve, et cetera, or founders or whatever. We are intensely wired. That's what we have in
mm,
common. And you can be intensely wired as a phenomenal yoga instructor.
that's right.
It's a behavioral disposition. This behavioral disposition comes with an enormous pitfall, and that is way over exacerbating the needs for significance and certainty. The first is really identifying with myself as a person who has achieved a certain rank and who must achieve. This is something that causes us emotional safety or the
Mm,
illusion of emotional safety. So we feel that we need to maintain it at all costs. Also, the facade of it as being our significance, as being our hallmark of how we look to other people and other people giving us the validation that we are what we think we are. That's another
mm,
trap. When we start locking ourselves into these positions and gaining more success, we have a very, very big problem. And that is when success becomes painful. The
mm,
most common things that I've seen in my clients are the downfalls of success. And that's essentially when
mm,
your life looks really good on Instagram and doesn't feel good on the inside. That's how I described my former life, right? Um, this can happen in lots of different and insidious ways. I'll give you an example from my own business because it's a great example. My business a couple of years ago, so it was going well, going well, going well, going well. And then 2 years ago, blows up, as in two X's overnight. I have not developed the ability to grow into this yet because
mm,
I'm still running on the old fakakta systems I had from the beginning. And because I'm still not interested in levels of conflict. And
mm,
because I have not really programmed myself for that level of success. And as a result of that, success feels terrible. It's exhausting.
mm.
It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
The profit margin is garbage, even though the money's great. I mean, everything and the conflict that was staggering. It was astonishing, like from canceled contracts to bizarre legal battles to stuff that I just had not
Mm,
anticipated, right? And I know a lot of people relate to this. The reason this happened was because I was not willing to let go of whatever status and certainty I had acquired up until that point. So, my point is,
mm.
this comes and recurs again and again, even if you've gone within and transcended. It's so easy for us to default to those old positions because that's what the nervous system knows, and that
Yes.
is what the nervous system will continue to default to. It was my job to, in my infinite wisdom, coach myself and go, wait a minute, are you telling me that you're miserable about success? Hang on, what do we do about this? And there was only one answer: step back enormously, take a real big step back, hire a lot more people, completely change the business, go where you're terrified to go, use yir'ah, use awe, and expand in the direction that is both scary and exhilarating.
Mhm.
Um, this is I call it the overachiever paradox or the superstar paradox. If you do not transcend it, you will be so attached to physical demonstrations of power that you will never really experience joy. That's
Mm.
let alone fun. And again, we said at the very beginning, right, Heather, that that's the whole point. If you have all the success and no fulfillment, why are you even doing this?
Yeah. I was just having this conversation with a friend who I feel like is in one of the middle of these big upheavals, right? Where it's like he needs to close this door over here because he's no longer really meant to serve those people and do what he was doing the way that he was doing it. And he's in this weird mode of like needing to transition and go over here. And it's also, ironically or not so ironically, I think the same challenge his clients face, right?
Yes,
Because
of
he's
course.
all about mindset and abundance and growing and constantly expanding our ability to lead, our ability to build. But it's that we were also having this exact conversation about the tug of war between ego achievement and really reaching
Yes.
inner alignment so that you don't have to live in that place of like having life look great on the outside and
Yeah.
not feel great on the inside.
Yes. And unfortunately, that as long as that tug of war is going on, you are going to keep climbing, but every 10% you add is going to feel like you have lifted another elephant onto your shoulders. A very, very heavy lift. If you decide, however, that you are ready to burn it all to the ground, to let go of the clients who you are just not for anymore, to the jam that is just not your jam anymore, to whatever you feel is simply not in your zone of genius, which means literally, in my case, letting go of about 80% of what was making that business work, you will not 2x, you will 10x. You will start to have a much easier time. You will have to a much far faster expansion too, and you'll be ready emotionally.
So in your process, because it sounds like, yes, strategy, being willing to make the business decisions that go along with supporting that growth are key. How did you reach the inner alignment place of knowing, right, this is the 80% I need to let go of?
I felt very bitter and very angry, and I
Ooh,
knew
listen
that
up,
that
ladies. Here's
yes,
the bitterness and
just
anger
bitter,
again.
angry, miserable, unrecognized, disrespected, all those feelings. And then I went,
Mm.
that's not you. Oh man, what's
Mm.
happening? Oh, you're in the wrong place again.
Yeah.
You've put yourself at the wrong party again. You
So
got to leave the
how'd
party.
you find the right party, right? Because I think the question becomes for people that know
Yeah.
something was this way, like what's next? How do you re-envision that?
I made a decision, and
Mhm.
I don't execute decisions overnight. I do not have Tracy Holland's behavioral style. I do not move fast. I move slow and easy, like
Mm.
an old man going into a nice warm bath. And I closed off what I needed to close off, tied up all the loose ends, but started to already inform the world that this is what I'm available for, and this is what
Mm.
I'm no longer available for. These programs are terminated. This is no longer
Close
available.
that door. That's right.
That exactly. And then we just moved into the next phase, and we'll continue to do that hopefully
Mm.
in the years to come. But it was a decision to, above all, just honor my preferences, and again, for the third time in my career, trust my desire, trust that this was
Yes.
available to me, trust that I will not die of hunger if I make this leap. Some people will come
Mhm.
with me.
It's so good. I mean, and I want to shout what you just said so that particularly the women that are listening hear this, but it's going to be valuable for anybody. Decision to honor my preferences, right? Starts with a decision, that clarity to just decide, and then
Mhm.
to take that action to follow through with actually closing the door. These
That's
programs
right.
are no longer available. I'm not going to offer this thing anymore. I'm not going to serve people in this way, whatever it is, right? And then
And it's not
trust.
negotiable. Yeah.
No, that's right. You have to actually close the door.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people get caught in that middle ground of like,
Mhm.
oh, I still got to pay my bills
Yeah,
while I'm moving to this, and that's the trust part. That's the trust part of like
that's true.
actually letting go.
You can't bargain with the universe.
Mm.
It knows exactly what you're doing. So you're either going
Yeah.
to go or you're not going to go. And those are your two options. Which
No,
one do
it's
you
it's
choose?
clear signals. The universe
Yeah,
responds to clear signals. Full stop. Has to
that's
be
right.
clear. Yeah.
That's true.
So if it's not clear to the universe, it's not going to be clear to your clients. It's not going to be clear to, the people that need to walk away and the people that need to come in.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh, I love this so much. And I feel like I have 89 other questions that I could ask you. For just out of respect for your time, I'd love to have you share for folks that are listening that are thinking, oh my gosh, I need to go connect with Keren. I need to follow her. I need to find out more about her work. Where do you show up online?
At Coach Karen on Instagram is the best place to find us because I share a lot of fun stuff and cat videos. And Karen is spelled with two E's. And then if you'd like a consultation or you actually want to read more about coaching, it's KarenEldad.com.
I love it. And we will share those also on the show notes page. So if you're listening, you can pop over to legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast, find Keren's episode, and that's Keren, Keren. Keren, you said a couple of really important, I mean, this whole conversation was full of important things, but right before we shifted, you mentioned that you move slow like an old man getting into a bathtub. And first of all, I love that. I think that people
Yeah.
need to hear there are different ways to decide, there are different ways to lead.
Yes.
and to honor their own system, their own process. Not everybody has to look like Tracy. Not everybody has to look like you, right? It's different.
That's
So I
right.
think that's important because I think a lot of people also hear stories where it's like, yeah, Tracy's a powerhouse. I mean, it's like in her branding.
That's right.
And not everybody decides or moves the way that Tracy does. And some people, I think, count themselves out of leadership or of like
Yeah.
obtaining profound results because they think, well, like, I don't look like that.
Yeah. Or starting a thought leadership brand or becoming a motivational speaker. And they all think that this is about being assertive a certain way and being extroverted a certain way, et cetera. And this is simply not true. More than 50% of CEOs are introverted people. I am an ambivert, by the way. I would rather spend at least 50% of my time in bed in a bathrobe surrounded by cats.
Kittens. I mean,
And
there's the kittens again.
exactly. And once you understand who you are and you operate at your own pace with your own authority, your whole life changes. It is the most important decision you can make. Ultimately, it's even more important than what you're going to launch. Because if that's not aligned to your soul, again, why even do it?
Oh, so good. So, so good. Keren, who do you love to support? Who are your people?
Oh man, I love everybody. But
Right? It's hard. It's hard.
yeah, I adore Madonna, who thank God is on tour right now, and Abraham Hicks. And if you're not familiar with Abraham Hicks's work, first Tracy, I'm sure talked about to death, as you know. But I love their work very, very much, and I support two big organizations. One of them is Bottomless Closet, which is sort of like Dress for Success, and they're coming up on their anniversary. And I think the most important organization that also got me started on the path of coaching is Crisis Text Line. It is the biggest suicide hotline in the world, and we're all volunteers. It's an amazing organization. So if you want to send any love, send it to Crisis Text Line.
Oh, I love it. Those are great shares. From a client perspective, who do you love and who do you
Oh,
support?
I adore very, very strung out, intensely wired superstars. And that that's pretty much that runs the gamut. I especially love founders. I currently am an executive coach at Nike and Estee Lauder and Deutsche Bank and big companies like that. But I adore founders. I think founders are braver than everybody else, and what they're dealing with is much harder than what everybody else is dealing with. Especially if you're a founder that is on a thought leadership track. In other words, your job is also to be visible. If I had a tiny slight preference, it would be for that.
I love that so much. And yes, I mean to the courage. And it's why I love entrepreneurs and even small business owners in general because of the courage that it takes to step out and say, I'm going to build this my way. I'm going to do this thing that I think I can do in the world.
Yeah, exactly. That
Yeah.
that takes chutzpah.
Oh, I love it. Well, I so appreciate you. It's just been such a joy to spend time with you and hear a little bit about your journey. What final thought would you leave our listeners with today?
Just do it.
Mm.
Do it. If it's been on your mind for a while, I'm sorry to tell you this is not going to get quieter. It's going to get much louder. And the reason you're listening to this podcast and every single episode in it is because Just Do It is exactly your jam. Just find your way to do it.
Oh, I love it so much. Goosebumps. And I love it when we get to end on goosebumps. Keren, I appreciate you. Still look forward to being in touch.
Thank you, Heather.